Hey guys, welcome to Snapshot. My name is Th3Dan, and every week we get together and take a look back at our Pastors After Dark show that we do on Sunday nights. A panel of pastors discussing a topic, usually something that's been sent in by somebody with questions that they would love a pastor to answer. And we do that weekly on Sunday nights, and then our show today is to kind of look back and recap that a little bit, and then look forward and at the next topic that's coming up on Sunday night. And so we're really excited to have you guys join us and watch us today. If you're not familiar with GMA Ministries, we are a community of Christians that love to game. We stream, we make online content, and we're really, we have a purpose of connecting people to one another and to God, and just sharing Christ's love to everyone in mediums like gaming or a Discord or online. And so we'd love for you to stop by, join our Discord, follow us on Twitch or YouTube. We'll have some links at the end of the show. Joining me this week is Father Ironheart. Let me bring him in here.
Hello, welcome. Glad to be here today.
Man, excited to do a show with you, man. It's been a minute. It's been a minute.
It has. It's been a long time.
Why don't you introduce yourself to the folks? You haven't been on Snapshot, I don't think, before. At least it's been a while. And tell them what you are and what you are. Tell them who you are and what you do. I hope I know what you are.
My name is Father Ironheart, or Tyler. I actually used to be on staff with GMA for a while. I've been in God Mode activated in the Discord in the community since maybe like day 2. I'm an associate pastor in Iowa, and because of that and just the busyness and all that job has, I actually have not been involved in GMA as much. But the Dan asked me to come back and be a part of Snapshot, and it's a lot of fun. I'm excited to be here. Doing pad and all that was a lot of fun, so it's nice to kind of dip my toe back in, so to speak, and get back into it just a little.
Well, and this is the easy way to get back in, right? Like
Exactly.
pads is longer and
longer. It's late at night. I'm usually in bed at that point on Sunday nights now. I'm like an old man now. It's ridiculous.
I relate to everything you're saying right now. When we had the idea of recording Snapshot as opposed to doing it live, like later at night, I was like, oh man, this is right up my dad bod alley. Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
Love it. All right. So we like to look back at pads from the previous week. And so we had a little bit of an interesting pads. Shadow's power went out. We had a no-show. A guy just had some family obligations, which, by the way, I don't care what you do in ministry. Family is your first ministry. Your marriage, your spouse, your kids, they are the preeminent ministry that you have, regardless if you're on staff or not. And so when that, don't ever apologize for handling that ministry obligation, because you should. That's very biblical. So it ended up being 2 guys. It was Dustin and Ferris playing Pokemon and just chatting, and they end up on this crazy rant about basically church as virtual reality. And I think they took it to like another level. It was like church in the metaverse or something. I don't know. Of course they're going to go too far. But it brought up a question that you and I have seen lots online, I'm sure, which is this concept of online church. And obviously church in VR is another level, church in the metaverse is some other level. I don't know, whatever. Right. And I thought it would be cool to chat about online church and maybe hone that down into a couple things. So we've certainly seen the debates. I want to get your thoughts on online church. I want to narrow this down this way. I think most of us, and I'm going to speak for you because I think I can here. Most of us would say any sort of one-way transmission of content. So a congregant or whatever sitting behind a screen, which all of the content comes one way, and there's nothing that goes back the other way, is not church. It's not the biblical definition of church. I'm not even sure you could say it's the extra biblical definition. It's not church. absorbing content in the
Mhm.
way you would a television show or maybe Twitch, but it's not church. Now, I'm putting words in your mouth, but I think you would agree with that.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. And I think many of us, even churches like mine, that we do broadcast our service
Yep.
online, particularly with COVID. And we have like chat where you can chat. And, I've got so many sessions of people on a Sunday watching that I know that represents somewhere in the range of 100 to 400 people, right?
Hmm.
But how many are actually chatting?
Right.
25, maybe,
Sure.
like, I mean, so we do that because we know we need to reach people on Sundays, but we're very clear, like that in and of itself as a standalone
Mhm.
is not church.
Mhm.
Now here's what I would ask you then. What are the essential elements of church? And then we'll talk about whether or not they can be achieved online, in VR, in a
Sure.
metaverse, in
Yeah.
another universe. I mean, I don't know.
Multiverse or something. I don't know.
Multiverse. Yeah, I don't know. Something.
I think, I thinking about that question, what are the essentials? I think there's like the two main things that I think would be things like baptism and the Lord's Supper. I think are like one of the main, like the really big two ones. I think
Church
ones that maybe,
ordinances, right?
yeah, church ordinances, sacraments,
Right.
depending on your persuasion, whatever it is.
Right.
I think those are huge. And I think another one that would be pretty vital would be corporate worship, worship with other believers. And I think what goes along with that, which includes things like being encouraged, accountability, all of those like things that come with interpersonal connections with other people, I think are vital because my understanding of the church is that when the church gathers, it's for the equipping of believers, for the filling up of believers to go out and do the work of ministry. And so you exalt God, you lift him up in worship, you're fed by his word, you're encouraged and you're uplifted. And you're there's a lot of like yous in there. It's really all this is about God, right? So don't hopefully that doesn't come across wrong, but it's about God. And then you go out and you do the work of ministry from
Right.
that point. So yeah.
So I would say that the essential elements of church, right,
Mhm.
is really very community driven,
Mhm.
relationally driven, right? And
Yep.
so there's, of course, the relationship with God, right? Corporate worship, everything we see about corporate worship in the church setting in the New Testament is about worshiping God in this relational manner that impacts me and impacts you because
Mhm.
we're together. And so in fact, the funny part is it's nested in Hebrews 10:23 through 25,
Mhm.
which is part of we quote that verse a lot, or those verses a lot, particularly like I heard those verses quoted a lot with churches that say like we're not going to close our doors
Mhm.
because of Hebrews 10, right? And so let me bring that up. Um, Hebrews 10:23 says, "Let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stir up one another to love and good works, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as we see the day drawing near." Now, the interesting part of that is, people took the little chunk of not neglecting to meet together and said, see, we have to meet physically or we don't have church.
Mhm.
And I could see that in that
Mhm.
justification. I also think there's some really interesting notes in there that we should talk about. The first is that if your intention with church does not include stirring up toward good works and encouraging, stirring up and encouraging, it's also not still church
Mhm.
because that's tied to the requirement. It's not just that you meet together, it's you meet together expressly for the purpose,
Mhm.
not just of worshiping God, because we're supposed to worship God all the time. I'm supposed to worship God Monday through
Sure.
Sunday. I mean, this is not a Sunday thing. And church is not a building. I don't go to church because I went to a building. And I
Sure.
don't go to church because I snuck into the back door and I sat in the back pew and I absorbed something, which is to me not that much different than absorbing content online. I
Mhm.
went to church when I had this, what Hebrews 10:23 through 25 says, when I had this
Mhm.
express intention of being stirred up toward good works and
Mhm.
and stirring someone else up toward good works.
Mhm.
Now, how do I do that in the context of a corporate worship service? So not a small group or something, right? But in a corporate worship service, how do I do that? There's the secret sauce.
Mhm.
Because if you look at Acts 2:42, it says this is just talking about the early church. What do? They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. So biblical teaching was involved, to the fellowship, that's of relational nature, to the breaking of bread, there's communion, and to prayers.
Mhm.
And so you see this, what are the early believers doing? Now, I absolutely think, and this is my own personal conviction, that corporate worship service is not enough relationally to do all the things you see here in Acts, right? Because I don't think you get the full picture of believers sharpening one another in a 200, 300, 500 person service. I think
Mhm.
to get that, you have to have a smaller setting, and it could be around a table, like it often was
Mhm.
in Acts. It could be a coffee table, or you were talking about meeting with some guys to
Mhm.
teach and learn how to read the word, right?
Yep.
That is an integral part of discipleship. It's an integral part of what we see biblically. So there are some things that I say, I look at and go, well, I don't know that certain things have to be part of a Sunday morning. They have to be part of your life, though, if you're
Mhm.
following the Lord and you want to be discipled. But there's an aspect here that I have to have some sort of relational impact on another believer or multiple believers when it comes to the intention of stirring them up, encouraging them,
Mhm.
like basically helping them go back out into a dark world and spread the
Mhm.
gospel.
Yeah.
Now, my question then becomes, are there ways to do that with technology?
Mhm.
And most of the indictments I've seen with technology are that technology is used to make things more artificial, and it separates people, and it does all these things. It can. I mean, absolutely can. I mean, like, we've seen that. But like, I've had experiences where technology has been used as a tool for the gospel that has been transformative.
Mhm.
I was on vacation with my wife visiting friends in Florida, and we went to Life Church, and Craig Rochelle's sermon was being piped from Oklahoma to Florida. And I'm
Mhm.
wrecked. I'm in tears, right? Because God's just doing all this work on me. And like, that's being beamed 1,500 miles.
Mhm.
I don't, theologically, I have no idea where I sit with video, whatever. I just know that God was at work. I was
Yeah.
encouraged. I was stirred up to good
Mhm.
works. The Lord was at work, right? So, what are the essential elements? I think you got the sacraments or the ordinances right. I think you got the relational aspect right. And then the real question goes, is there a way then to use technology to do this, to enhance, maybe not enhance is even the right word, but to further the gospel?
Mhm.
And I'll point back at Analog Church, which is Jay Kim's book. The irony of this is that Jay Kim's book is used to beat everyone over the head that uses any sort of media, right? I don't think that's his intention. I'll be honest. The guy's a super grace-filled guy. If you've ever interacted with him, he's just very gracious guy. The way people use his book is not the way he uses his own book.
Sure.
Um, and I also, although a lot of the book is warnings,
Mhm.
but he has this point that says the early church looked at the printing press the same way.
Mhm.
They said, if everyone has a Bible, they're not going to hold the Bible on Sunday morning in such high regard because they could go home and read it. And so Sunday services won't be as important. And they were right. That happened. But none of us are going, let's roll back the printing press. We shouldn't have it. They said, well,
Mhm.
the Amish. But other than the Amish, I don't think there's that many of us doing that. I mean, what would you say to that?
There's a lot. It's interesting because I'm gonna go back a little bit. I don't want to like take us all over the place, but one of the things you had said as we look at like the couple verses, and looking at, because Acts is still up on the screen, devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching, the fellowship, the breaking of bread, and prayers, and then you go back to Hebrews and what it says in Hebrews of um, la 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 la. I have my Bible in front of me. Um, Stirring up one another to love and good works. I almost wonder, thinking about like, is there's and this isn't even looking at like the virtual church. This is looking at like our current Sunday morning.
Mm-hmm.
Are the way we do Sunday morning now, is that wrong? Like, should that be different? Because I've this is my first pastoral job that I'm at, and my church has an average of like maybe 130 people a week.
Okay.
And I start to think like, man, if this is any bigger, I can't really do the work of a pastor as extensively as I could here because there's so many more people. You'd have to bring on more staff and blah blah blah. And so it makes me wonder like, are we doing church wrong? And I know that you're at a bigger church. You were just telling me you're at a church that has maybe like 1,000 people. And so I don't want to it sound like I'm throwing you under the bus or anything, but I think
No,
like,
no, no. Like this is, dude. We just had to go through this. Like this
yeah,
is such a real thing.
it was like I was listening to Paul Washer and he talked about his church, like the church he attends, because he's not a pastor there. He's like a regular guy there, I think, if I remember correctly. And every week their services are like 2 hours long. And the first like 45 minutes is prayer.
Mm-hmm.
And then or like the first 30 minutes is prayer, and then the next 30 minutes is worship, and then there's like an intermission to go to the bathroom, and then the
Mm-hmm.
next 50 minutes is expositional preaching.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, every week they have a meal together.
Yep.
And I'm thinking like, okay, who does that? And as I was listening to him talk, I'm like, who does that? And then I realized he goes on to say, guess who comes to our church? College students. And I'm like, get out of town. There's like, he's like, yeah, that,
Yeah.
I mean, he's obviously, I'm watching this online and stuff, but like, they have a 2 hour service and then a meal, and they're getting college kids to come.
Well, think about this, because this is what we've had to do is we've said, look, unless we're going to artificially limit the size, right?
Sure.
Like you can't get you look first 75 in the door, buddy, and you're otherwise you're on the way out.
Right.
I mean, it's not going to be, some of these things are not going to happen on a Sunday morning inside the sanctuary. Some are,
Mhm.
but some of these aren't. And so our model, our primary mechanism of discipleship is the small group. And man, those
Sure.
small groups are over dinner,
Yep.
and they're, some of them are 3 and 3.5 and 4 hours long,
Mm.
and they're praying and they're doing accountability, and they're I mean, the guys and girls are splitting up, right? And they're in
Mhm.
confession time, like where they're like grilling each other and
Yeah.
encouraging each other, right? And that is what we're talking about.
Mhm.
And the thing is that they'll get more done in that intimate setting than in a 75 person sanctuary, because they're not going to do that in 75 person,
Sure. Sure. Sure.
or they're probably going to do it in a 50 person. I mean, so but if it's not happening, if your church experience is just the Sunday morning service, you come in and you experience it for 90 minutes and you leave. Oh, trust me, I have a lot to say about if 90 minutes is what you're willing to give. I mean, like I there's some drums I'm beating, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And so, to try to bring it back then, because this now we're starting to get into like just the in person. If we want to bring it back to like the virtual setting, and can we do these things virtually? Um, because I think there's two ways to look at it. You can look at it as the online setting is an exception for those that are truly maybe stuck, because you sent me a video and I looked up a video where there's truly someone who's got a chronic life-threatening disease where they are unable to leave their home.
Right.
Now, I don't know the conditions of their disease or anything, but I do think that it is the fault of the local church, if they were a part of one, that they haven't reached out and connected. If they haven't, I think that's a local church should be doing that if they're
Sure.
connected to a local church. Now, if they're not, how do they know, right? But I think that an online community could be of benefit.
Right.
But I think what the problem is, in my mind, is that you get people that see the online community, the online thing, regardless of where you want to go with it, whether it's um, watching it through a screen, it's VR, it's all whatever it is. I think they want to replace the in-person local church with that. Now, don't get me wrong. I've fostered tons of friendships online since I've been in GMA. I mean, you and I we even caught up a little bit, and we didn't even chat all that much, but we caught up because we remembered
Right.
what's going on in each other's lives. Like I've made tons of friends through GMA and Discord and stuff like that. But we always talk about, what the day we get to meet,
Right.
the day we get to be together, the day we get to everyone meets in Texas, or everyone meets in California, or everyone meets in some central location, probably in the middle of Kansas or something. I don't know. Like we talk about meeting together, right? GMA has always talked about the fact like, oh, what if we got a bus, like a pad bus, and picks up all the pastors and we do a road trip? Like everyone's focused on in person.
Right.
And the reality is that while online's fine, it can't replace the in-person connections. Because I mean, we've seen it where someone, and people can do this in person too, but we've seen it online where it's so easy for someone to put on a username and a profile picture and claim to be one person, and then we find out that they're actually like sending inappropriate messages to people and
Right,
like
right, right.
doing super creepy stuff. Like you can hide who you are online so much more easily than you can in person, and it makes it that much more difficult to authentically stir one another up in love and good works when it's through a screen or a microphone or something like that.
So three things, and I'll try to make them all very quick.
Yeah.
In the at the level of technology today, uh, I don't think you can truly replicate church online yet. You could, I can get really good small groups online. We have a bunch actually. I'm shocked at how many online small groups we have in our church.
Sure.
A lot of the COVID stuff, immune compromised, a little bit of distance stuff, but I mean, they're deep. They're long, they're not short, they're long, man. Those guys are on there 2.5, 3 hours, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
real, they're genuine, they're stirring each other up. They're meeting
Mm-hmm.
they're checking all the boxes, right? These are really great small groups. I'm fine with that, right? But when it comes to the corporate worship service, the thing I can't replicate online yet is I can't set you in the room with someone that kind of rubs you the wrong way.
Mm.
And that's actually part of it. It's part of
Mm-hmm.
church, right?
Yeah.
Because that person that rubs you the wrong way, the fact that you don't love them yet, you just tolerate them, that's the gap of the work of the Holy Spirit in your life that's not done transforming you, and
Mm.
them being there is actually a stimulus for the work of the
Yeah.
Spirit.
Yeah.
So I can't get now. I may be able to. I look at where VR is headed. I look at where graphics are headed. I saw the graphics for the Matrix thing that they put out, the little NVIDIA Matrix. I don't know if you saw that. It was so real. I thought that was a film, and the whole thing was CGI. The entire thing was CGI, and it
Interesting.
was so real that I'm like, oh my
It's like, wait
gosh.
a minute.
So I don't saying we're a year away, but clearly at the rate we're
Mm-hmm.
going, there's some point 10 years down the road where you could snap on a VR whatever and be sitting in the congregation and interacting with every other person, and the only thing at that point you're not getting is like touch of the pew and the people or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. And you're singing and you're hearing all their bad singing, and who cares? And I mean, like, that's coming. So maybe I'll say maybe I could get there. It's not yet though. Um, that's number one. Number two, have faced this problem directly. Okay, and here's the problem: we told people they needed to watch online because we had to shut churches down, and people were sick, and then we had another contingent of people that made this all political, and so they were so angry politically that they were like, "I'm going to throw all caution to the wind. I'm going to cough on people, and I'm not wearing." I mean, doing all this weird stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like even the percentage of people vaccinated is so much lower in churches because we have so many conservatives that, and frankly, let's be honest, in the evangelical world, we love our crazy theories and our conspiracy theories, and right, we're chasing those down. And I mean, like, listen,
Tinfoil hats, man.
yeah, I've been vaxxed. I had the double shot, the Moderna, and I've been boosted, and I get great 5G signal. That's all I want to say. I get great. I mean, but it's that stuff,
It's
right? So,
phenomenal, right? Yeah.
okay, so we had to push people home, but now once things cleared up, we're like, come back, and they didn't all come back. We opened the
Mm-hmm.
doors, and they didn't all come back. Now, let me ask you this, because I had someone tell me like, we just gotta tell them the importance of gathering together, Hebrews 10, and I'm like, if our service was that attractive, that encouraging, that stirring, would we have to force them to be back here?
Hmm.
I'm just asking. Like, when you fell in love, someone had to force you to go see your wife?
It's interesting. So I've talked about this with a couple people before. I think the reality is that before um before COVID, people didn't love the church as much as they thought they did. And then when COVID happened and they were forced home, they realized, oh, I love all this stuff more than the church. And it doesn't come that way here. And it doesn't come out that way here, but their actions reflect it. I think people were mediocre Christians at best before COVID. And I'm just generalizing, obviously, because that's not the case for everyone. But I think the love for God was so low that when we were pushed home, we realized I love all the other stuff more. And people didn't come back because that love was never there in the first place. And I think to an extent, what we've seen in what COVID has done and forcing people home, I think it's really shown where our hearts are at. Like, what was filled first, baseball stadiums or church pews? Like, what were people more excited to go see in person? Were they more excited to go see a baseball game in person, or were they more excited to come back to church in person? And I truly think that COVID has allowed people to say, ah, I was gone. Now I'm kind of used to it, so I guess I'm just not going to do it. And yeah, the importance of gathering is still there, but I think they've tasted something else and they've bought into the lie that that something else is better.
Now, here's my question.
Yep.
This is a question we asked internally, right?
Sure.
So we sat around the whiteboard weeks in a row for a while, actually, and worked on this.
I'll answer it right now in minutes.
Perfect.
Just kidding.
I think some of what you're saying is accurate. I think there's people
Sure.
that came for repetition, habit. It was habitual. It was tradition. Grandma did it, so I do it. Especially in the South.
Yeah.
We're not in the South, but in the South, like that's a thing already, right? I think that's true. I also think, because you and I have probably both experienced this before. I know I've experienced churches that were just so magnetic. Like, I mean, people that like they're so in love with Christ that they are a like you just want to be around them.
Mm-hmm.
You can't help it, right? I mean, they're just like, oh gosh, it's like salve for your wounds. Okay, that is supposed to be the church. I mean, read everything about the way the New Testament talks about the church. The church is supposed to be that. That's what Jesus was, right? People were just flocking to the guy. Are we that? I asked the question, closed doors. Are we so encouraging, so attractive, not attractive in shiny light stuff. I mean, in hope, in encouragement, in
holiness,
in Christ's love, in holiness, in humility, in my concern for you. That because listen, somebody that is so concerned for you, that loves you, that bears your burdens, that just is delighted to see you, you keep showing up. You'll keep I mean, that's a thing. And so I said, we've got to take a hard look at whether or not that is the tone when you walk in the door. And we did. And it wasn't. It wasn't the tone. The tone was like, we're glad you're here. Now let's get to the things that we do, like let's get to our songs. Let's get to our, I mean, and we changed a lot about our services because the tone wasn't there. It just wasn't there. I want to be so irresistible. You can't stay away.
Right. And I think that, part of that comes to like, because you talked about how much your groups are like, man, they're meeting for like up to 4 hours. It's like, okay, great. When they're meeting for 4 hours, what are they doing? And I don't want to like, I don't know anything about your groups. I don't know anything about that. But like when they're in those groups, okay, those groups are irresistible because they're doing all this stuff. Is that transitioning now to everywhere else?
Right.
Or is that only in that group because they know those people? Or is it I hate this word, but is it oozing out into like every other part of their life? Would their coworkers say the same things their small group would say? Would the person in the seat next to him or the pew next to him at church, would they say the same thing? Like, is it transitioning outside of those groups?
Yeah, I would say the people that are the groups that are meeting very consistently and for longer periods of time, I don't have attendance issues from those people. I don't. Well, I got no attendance issues. They're flocking to the church.
Well, and it's not just the attendance issues. It's the what are they putting on when they're there? So one thing we're trying to figure out at our church is like, how do we connect with people? Because in North Iowa, like people are like, They come in and they're looking at the floor and they're like, if you talk to me, I'll scream, and then they leave. Like,
Hmm.
don't talk to me. I'm here and I'm gone. That's
Right.
it.
Right.
And so we ask the question, like, how do we connect with these people that are like like in and out, these stowaways that are like coming in, don't want to be talked to, and then leave. And so it's like I had thought of like we need to create like a culture of connection. Like we
Yeah.
need to like, and I hate those cliche kind of things, but like we need to make this environment where every person is gonna say, "How are you doing this morning? I don't know your name. I've seen you here. We've come for years. I don't know your name. What's your name?" Or I've
Yep.
never seen you here. I
Yep.
have we met before? Like
Yep.
creating that kind of environment where a simple like hello, right? I actually saw a tweet a while ago, and this gal visited a church. I think it was a Presbyterian church, and she had little kids and like a little baby, and the baby was like crying during service. And an old lady came out from like the sanctuary and was like, "I'll take care of your kid. You go sit and listen." And the gal's like, "Seriously?" She goes, "Yeah, you go listen." She's like, "I've been here. I'll watch your kid for you." And she took care of the kid, and the mom got to go back in and sit and listen to the service. And I'm like, what kind of culture, what kind of love for Jesus do you have to see that and to have such a love not only for Christ but for that person to get up and say, "Hey, I'm going to take care of this for you."
Right.
And I think that's the kind of stuff that like you and I are trying to get at. Like as realistic as some of this stuff could be in 10 years, I think that's the kind of stuff that won't ever be virtual. And it maybe to an extent it could be, maybe like this much, but it's never going to fully get there.
Right.
And I think when you know you look at to go back to like Hebrews 10 and talking about not neglecting to meet together, in the context of this setting, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have
Right.
digitalness, but there's a reason for that. In Romans it says, at the right time Christ died for the ungodly. he
Right.
didn't he didn't come in 2022 and die and raise from the dead, because then we'd have to deal with all these different things. Like
Well,
he
we
died,
do.
right?
You
He
and me.
died then. The
Right.
scripture was written then. There's no
Yeah.
digital stuff, and
Yeah.
I think partly there's a reason for that. You meet in person, you gather in person. Jesus was in person with his disciples. He didn't say, "Hey, meet me on Zoom in an hour." He it was all in person. And regardless of like the other stuff in there, I think that's an important aspect because there's so much in-person stuff that happens when the local church gathers, when there's a love for Jesus and a love for others that just can't be replaced anywhere else.
Well, if technology in the context of this adds any artificialness, like glosses over, makes me look better than I am, makes me look
Mhm.
clean, more cleaned up, makes me then already I've got a problem because I'm
Mhm.
lacking the authenticity and vulnerability that's necessary for a gospel connection. I'll say with this last thing, and we'll do our preview for next week, and that's this. Um, Ray Ortland Jr., who I talk about nonstop because he's my hero at this point, said something to this extent, and then I was reading a book that he wrote, and it's in there too. He said churches over the course of the last 15 years have gotten really good at their orthodoxy, writing out our doctrinal statements and being really
Mhm.
serious about theology and doctrine. But we're still pretty terrible at orthopraxy.
Mhm.
And he said it's one thing to say on your website with your doctrine that you want to be a gospel centered church. It's another thing for people to feel like you're gospel centered when they walk in.
Mhm.
And his point was we all know the person who messes up, and so they won't come back to church. And we all look at that person in the back of our minds, kind of shake our finger and go, well, church is for messy people. You're not supposed to run away from church. Like, you're supposed to come heal here. The very fact that they don't feel like they can heal in our church is the indictment on us, not them.
Mhm.
And I was like,
Mhm.
oh no, we got to go back to the drawing board, guys. I'm calling it an emergency session. We're getting the whiteboard markers. I love it. I love it. Right. It's keeping
Yeah.
me up at night. Like, how do we live out the gospel in our services in our church so you feel that when you walk in the door, the tone of
Mhm.
everybody, the old lady that'll run up and take your kid, right,
Mhm.
matches gospel centeredness. That
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think a part of that too, like, I, and I don't want this to sound like a pushback, but maybe it is. I don't know. But like a part of it, like Jesus got people upset.
Yeah.
Like he pushed back on things. And I think part of this, I think there's going to be certainly some situations where people feel like they can't come to church and heal. And I think that's a total valid thing. And I also think there's another part where people think like, they're just judgmental jerks and they don't actually care about who I am. And the it couldn't be further from the truth. We totally
Right.
care. The reality is that we're going to tell you things that sting because we care, because we love you, because we want you to know who Jesus is. And I think having both of those things, and I think as Christians we get it. Like we need both of those. Like I don't know about you, but I like to listen to sermons that really punch me in the gut because I need a punch in the gut to like wake me up, to help me figure out like, dude, you're so dumb. Like just get your stuff together and figure it out. Like I need that kind of stuff. But someone who's from the outside who doesn't know that, they're going to hear that and be like, wow, they're so mean. And it's like, no, 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 this is good. Like this is it tastes sweet in my mouth. I love it. I want to eat it up. And
10 years ago, I could handle a Washer, a MacArthur, a Driscoll tone. Now I can't.
mm,
And not that there's not truth. Gosh, it's chock full. But I have to have it from a Francis Chan, a Tim Keller, or a Matt Chandler,
sure.
because there's just the tone is so different.
Hmm.
And same truths. All believe in inerrancy. All believe in in a high regard of the Scripture. It's a tone problem. And have you read Gentle and Lowly by Dane Ortland?
I haven't. I've seen it, and it's probably going to be in my queue of like 20 plus books.
Yeah,
But
I know. I got so many books to read. I love it, right? And I'm trying to model myself as a guy who's not naturally gentle and has
mm,
no empathy bone. It just was taken out of me at birth. Learning sympathy, empathy, learning
mm,
gentleness, the art of gentleness, is a it's going to be a lifelong journey,
hmm,
right? I might have made
yeah,
one or two steps here, but I got a ways to go. But it's changing me, man. It's
yeah.
changing me, and I love it.
That's
I absolutely love it.
And see, I think I'm on the other end. I think sometimes I tend to be too gentle, and the reality is that sometimes I've been too gentle, and I've not said enough.
Mm.
And there's been situations where I needed to say more, and I was like, maybe I won't.
It's a
Maybe I'll hold my tongue for now.
It's a great
And
tension. It's a
it
great tension to
is,
have.
it is. But I think I'm seeing, especially as I'm meeting more with guys one on one, and I'm realizing like there's a part of me that needs to meet them where they're at. There's a part of me that says, okay, I need to push you off the cliff and let you like try to take off here. Now that that probably is not a super great analogy because I go with like self help stuff, but like just this idea of like I'm gonna push you a little bit further that maybe you wanted to go and all that
So
kind of stuff.
Ray Orton would say, instead of pushing them off the cliff, he would say, invite them to something better.
Mm,
Invite them to something better. Invite them to something that satisfies. Invite them
hmm,
to a contentment that doesn't go away. Invite them to a yoke that is light, right? It's an
yeah,
invitation to something better, more than a push off the cliff. Look, I've there are a few guys, but most of the guys I meet, they know they're screwing up. Like they're not, they
right,
know.
yeah,
Like there's a few guys who are really dumb. Okay, but except for that, the rare exception, they already know and they're
sure,
shamed for it. And so they
hmm,
get callous to it because they can't deal with the shame. And
hmm,
so this invitation of something better is like the invitation to the woman at the well, right? Is like there's
sure.
something better. So a word of encouragement so that we can get done because Shadow's going to have some time editing this bad boy.
Sucker.
Everything, everything, every tool, technology included, can be used for God's glory. And I would just my encouragement to people is, as opposed to, we should have safeguards. We should be concerned when people, I don't know, decide they're going to do church on their couch from now on in sweatpants. That should be a concern. But also, let's inspire people to have spirit-led creativity when it comes to our lives and our ministries, and with technology. I want people to figure out how to use this tool as well as we use the printing press. And it's not going to be easy. We're gonna have some missteps. We need scripture as our compass to tell us when we're off the rails. But let's not look at it like it's a devious thing. It's just a tool. Let's figure out, Holy Spirit, how can you help us be creative, be inspired to use this to further kingdom work? Knowing that there are red flags, knowing that there need to be cautions and warnings. Let's figure that out, because it will, just like the printing press, it won't go away. So how do we navigate kingdom work with it? And again, invite them into something greater. Like our work right now is we're making our services so inviting that if you're on your couch, you're missing out. You're missing out. You're getting a fraction of the love that is, and tone and warmth that is happening in the building if you're doing it from your couch. And we're letting you know that. All right, next on Sunday, Pads is tackling how should Christians view new Christian music. And like I'm sure we could talk about. We're going to talk about this next week when they're done. Are you guys hymns? Are you choruses? Are you kind of newer music? What are you, acoustic only? I mean, what's going on at your church?
Our church is a worship band. We've got like a bass guitar, drums. Well, it's a drum. It's drums, whatever it is. It's drums. Keyboard, some acoustic guitars, couple singers. Newer music. Sometimes we'll do hymns every now and then, but pretty much newer-ish music. So
okay, all right. I'm going to save mine. I'll tell you about our interesting journey through changing our worship and everything next week when we do this, because I used up all of our time. But I'm really interested to see what the panel says. Guys, if you don't currently follow GMA, you can follow GMA on Discord, on YouTube, Twitter, and Twitch. My name's Th3Dan. Thanks for hanging in there. It's a little longer than normal. I hope that doesn't become the pattern, but I just want to invite you to the conversation on Sunday nights at Pastors After Dark on Twitch and on YouTube. Come join us, hang out, ask live questions, talk to live pastors. We love you. We can't wait to see you again. Thanks for watching.